Think about the last time you wanted something and did not get it. Maybe it was a raise you deserved. Maybe it was an idea you presented and nobody took seriously. Maybe it was a conversation where you knew you were right, you had all the arguments, you had the facts, and the other person still walked away unconvinced. What happened? You were not wrong. You were not unprepared. You just did not know how to communicate in a way that moves people. And that skill, the ability to persuade, to negotiate, to make people see things your way, is not a talent you are born with. It is a craft. It is a set of techniques that can be learned, practiced, and mastered by anyone who takes it seriously. Today we are going to study that craft in English. Not the polite textbook version. The real version. The version that works in boardrooms and difficult conversations and moments when the stakes are high and you cannot afford to be ignored. By the end of this video you will have 30 or more powerful English expressions for persuasion and negotiation. You will understand the psychology behind why people say yes. And you will never walk into an important conversation feeling powerless again. Subscribe to this channel if you want English that actually gives you an advantage in life. Now let's begin. Part 1. The biggest mistake people make when trying to persuade someone. Most people think persuasion is about having the best argument. They prepare their facts. They line up their evidence. They build a logical case that, on paper, is completely convincing. And then they present it. And the other person disagrees anyway. And they cannot understand why. Here is why. People do not make decisions based on logic. They make decisions based on emotion. And then they use logic to justify those decisions afterward. This is not an opinion. It is one of the most well-documented findings in behavioral psychology. The emotional brain decides first. The rational brain explains the decision second. Which means that if you are trying to convince someone with facts alone, you are communicating with only half of their brain. And it is the wrong half. The most persuasive communicators in the world understand this instinctively. They do not lead with data. They lead with connection. They do not start with evidence. They start with understanding. They make the other person feel heard, valued, and respected before they make a single argument. In English, this approach has a name. It is called building rapport. Rapport means a feeling of mutual understanding and trust between two people. When you have rapport with someone, they are open to you. When you do not, they are closed regardless of how strong your argument is. Here is a key expression for building rapport in English. I completely understand where you are coming from. This sentence does something powerful. It tells the other person that before you respond, you have genuinely tried to see things from their perspective. And most people are so unaccustomed to being truly understood that this sentence alone changes the temperature of the conversation. Practice it. Use it before you disagree with someone. Use it before you make a request. Use it whenever you need to open a door that feels closed. I completely understand where you are coming from. And I would like to share a perspective that might add something to what you are thinking. That is not weakness. That is strategy. Part 2. The language of authority. Here is something nobody tells you about communication. The way you speak tells people how to treat you before you have said a single meaningful word. Your vocabulary, your sentence structure, your pace, your precision, these things signal to every person in the room whether you are someone to take seriously or someone to dismiss. And most people, without realizing it, speak in a way that gives away their power before the conversation even begins. They use hedging language. Phrases that soften their statements so much that the statement disappears. They say things like, I just thought maybe it could possibly be worth considering. They add so many qualifications to their ideas that by the end of the sentence, they have unsaid the idea completely. They end statements as questions. Their voice rises at the end of a sentence that should be confident and flat. This is called upspeak, and it communicates uncertainty even when you feel certain. They apologize before they speak. Sorry, can I just say something quickly? Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, I might be wrong, but... Every unnecessary sorry you say reduces your perceived authority in the room. The language of authority is different. It is clear. It is direct. It is calm. It does not apologize for existing. Here are 3 expressions that communicate authority naturally in English. The first is, my view is that. Not "I think maybe" or "I feel like perhaps." My view is that it is a statement of perspective delivered with confidence. Does not demand agreement. Simply states a position without apology. The second is, the evidence suggests. When you are making a case, this phrase signals that your position is based on something real, not just opinion. It elevates your argument from personal preference to informed conclusion. The third is, what I propose is. Not, I was wondering if maybe we could. What I propose is. It is the language of someone who has thought carefully and arrived at a recommendation. It invites discussion from a position of confidence, rather than from a position of seeking permission. Practice these phrases until they feel natural. Because the moment your language changes, the way people respond to you changes too. And that change happens faster than you think. Part 3. The Psychology of Yes. Robert Cialdini is a psychologist who spent 30 years studying why people say yes. And his findings changed everything we know about persuasion. He identified 6 principles that make people agree, comply, and change their minds. And every single one of them can be applied in English, in real conversations starting today. The first principle is reciprocity. People feel a deep psychological need to return favors. When someone gives you something, you feel obligated to give something back. When someone helps you, you want to help them. This is not a weakness. It is human nature. The application in persuasion is simple. Give first. Help before you ask. Offer value before you request anything. And when the moment comes to make your request, the other person will already feel a subtle pull toward saying yes. In English, the language of reciprocity sounds like this. I have been thinking about the challenge you mentioned last week, and I found something that might be useful for you. You give first. Then, when the moment is right, you make your ask. The second principle is social proof. People look at what others are doing to decide what they should do. When they see that many people have chosen something, they feel more confident choosing it too. In persuasion, you use social proof by referencing the behavior of others. Most teams in this situation have found that this approach works well. 3 of our biggest clients have already made this shift. This is becoming the standard in the industry. You are not inventing evidence. You are framing genuine evidence in a way that activates the social proof instinct. The third principle is authority. People trust experts. They follow the advice of people who demonstrate knowledge, experience, and credibility. When you speak with clarity and precision, when you reference relevant expertise, when you demonstrate that you have done your research, people naturally defer to your judgment. A useful phrase. Based on what I have seen in similar situations. This sentence positions you as someone with experience and pattern recognition. It is not arrogance. It is earned authority, communicated confidently. The fourth principle is liking. People say yes to people they like. This sounds obvious, but most people in professional settings forget it. They focus entirely on the logical content of their communication and ignore the relationship dimension completely. The most persuasive communicators invest in relationships before they need them. They remember names. They ask genuine questions. They find common ground. They make the people around them feel seen and valued. Not as a technique, but as a genuine expression of respect. Because the best persuaders are not manipulators. They are genuinely interested in the people they work with. The fifth principle is scarcity. People want what is rare. When something feels limited, its perceived value increases. When an opportunity feels temporary, the motivation to act increases. In English, the language of scarcity sounds like this. This window is not going to stay open indefinitely. The timing on this is important. We have a limited number of positions available. You are not creating false urgency. You are communicating genuine constraints clearly and directly. The sixth principle is commitment and consistency. Once people have agreed to something small, they are psychologically motivated to remain consistent with that agreement. This is why skilled negotiators always look for small points of agreement early in a conversation. Because each small yes makes the next yes more likely. The phrase that activates this principle in English. Can we agree on this one point at least? You are not asking for everything. You are asking for one small step. And that small step builds a momentum of agreement that can carry the whole conversation forward. Part 4. How to handle objections without losing ground. Here is where most people collapse in a negotiation. Someone pushes back. Someone disagrees. Someone says no. And suddenly the person who had been confident and clear loses their footing. They get defensive. They repeat themselves louder. They back down completely. Or they freeze. None of these responses serve you. There is a better way. The first rule of handling objections is this. Never argue with an objection. Validate it instead. When you argue with an objection, you create resistance. The other person digs deeper into their position. The conversation becomes a competition rather than a collaboration. And in a competition, even if you win the argument, you often lose the relationship, the deal, or the outcome you actually wanted. When you validate an objection, something different happens. The other person feels heard. Their defense comes down. And they become genuinely open to hearing your response. The language of validation in English sounds like this. That is a completely fair concern. I appreciate you raising that, because it is an important point. You are right to flag that. Let me address it directly. These sentences do not mean you agree. They mean you respect the other person enough to take their concern seriously. And that respect, expressed clearly and genuinely, is often the difference between a closed door and an open conversation. The second rule of handling objections is to ask before you tell. When someone objects to your idea, the instinct is to defend immediately, to explain, justify, to pile on more evidence. But often, the stated objection is not the real objection. The real concern is something underneath, something the person has not said yet. Ask one question before you respond. Help me understand what is driving that concern. Or, what would need to be true for you to feel comfortable with this? These questions do not challenge the objection. They invite the other person to show you what is really going on. And once you understand the real concern, you can address it directly instead of defending against the surface objection indefinitely. The third rule is to offer a bridge, not a wall. A wall says, I disagree with your objection and here is why you are wrong. A bridge says, I hear your concern and here is how we can address it together. In English, a bridge sounds like this. What if we approached it this way instead? Or, here is something that might address that concern directly. Or, I think there is a way to get what you need and still move this forward. You are not surrendering. You are not abandoning your position. You are finding a path that works for both people. And that is not a compromise of strength. That is the highest expression of it. Part 5. The most powerful tool in negotiation. I want to share with you the single most powerful tool in negotiation. Not a phrase. Not a technique. Practice. Silence. Most people are terrified of silence in a conversation. When a pause appears, they rush to fill it. They repeat themselves. They add more information. They make concessions they did not need to make. They talk themselves out of positions they were holding perfectly. The best negotiators use silence deliberately. After they make a key point, they stop. They let the silence do its work. Because silence creates pressure. Not aggressive pressure. Natural pressure. The kind that gives the other person space to process, to consider, to respond. In English, there is a phrase that captures this perfectly. I will let that sit for a moment. You make your point and then you say, I will let that sit for a moment, and you stop talking. You have told the other person that you are done, that you are confident, and that you are giving them space to think. It is one of the most sophisticated things you can say in a high-stakes conversation. Learn to be comfortable with silence. Not as a weapon but as a signal of confidence. The person who rushes to fill every pause is showing that they are nervous. The person who sits comfortably in silence is showing that they trust their position. Train yourself to pause after your key points. Count to 3 in your head before responding to a difficult question. Allow space in conversations instead of filling it. Because in negotiation, the person who speaks less often wins more. Consolidation. The expressions that will change your conversation. Let me give you the most powerful phrases from today's lesson. These are expressions that work in job interviews, salary negotiations, team meetings, client conversations, and any situation where you need to communicate with confidence and influence. To build rapport before a difficult conversation, say, "I completely understand where you are coming from." To express your position with authority, say, "My view is that," or "what I propose is." To use social proof effectively, say, "Most people in this situation have found that," or "This has become the standard approach." To validate an objection without agreeing with it, say, "That is a completely fair concern," or "I appreciate you raising that." To discover the real concern behind an objection, ask, "What would need to be true for you to feel comfortable with this?" To find a bridge instead of a wall, say, "What if we approached it this way instead?" To use silence as a tool, say, "I will let that sit for a moment." And when you are ready to close, when you have made your case, addressed the concerns, and built genuine rapport, use this phrase. "Based on everything we have discussed, I think we are both in a position to move forward." Not a demand. Not a plea. A statement of confidence that assumes alignment and invites agreement. Closing. Let me say something honest before this video ends. The skills we discussed today are not shortcuts. They are not tricks that work every time on every person regardless of context. Real persuasion is not manipulation. It is the ability to communicate your genuine value clearly, to understand what the other person actually needs, and to find the place where those two things connect. The most persuasive people in the world are not the ones who talk the most. They are the ones who listen the most deeply, who ask the best questions, who understand that a conversation is not a performance, it is an exchange, and that the goal is not to win, it is to find a solution that works. That understanding, combined with the language tools you learned today, gives you something very few people have. The ability to walk into any conversation in English with real confidence. Not the false confidence of someone who has memorized lines. The genuine confidence of someone who understands people and knows how to communicate with them. That is the English of influence. And it is yours now. Subscribe to this channel for more English that gives you a real advantage in life. Leave a comment below and tell me, what is one conversation coming up in your life where you are going to use what you learned today? I will see you in the next lesson. Keep growing. Keep speaking. Keep winning.